It's 5:30, and I'd like to call to order this Monroe County Plan Commission meeting to order. So just for those people who are in attendance, I'd like to announce that the Howland three-lot minor subdivision at 703, 11, 13, and 15 has been continued by petitioner, and we will not be hearing that tonight. So if you're here for that petition, there's no need for you to stay. And there's also a petition, another petition in Holland Fields that has been continued by the petitioner. So if you're here in attendance or online for those two petitions, we will not be hearing those tonight. And there's another Holland Fields Phase 2 subdivision improvement agreement that's been continued by the petitioner. So with that being said, we've called the meeting to order, and Ms. Behrman, if you would kindly call the roll.
Sure. David Bush.
Here.
Margaret Clements.
Here.
Tron Enright Randolph, not present currently. Scott Ferris.
Here.
Rudy Fields.
Here.
David Henry.
Present.
Great. I didn't check, was your camera, make sure your camera works for when we do some official voting too.
Sure.
Jeff Morris.
Here.
Edward Ullman.
Here.
And Julie Thomas.
I'm here via Teams.
Right, so we have 6 people in person, and that makes us an in-person quorum.
Would you kindly introduce the evidence?
Sure. I'd like to introduce the following items into the evidence. It would be the Monroe County Development Ordinance as adopted and amended, the Monroe County Comprehensive Plan as adopted and amended, the Monroe County Plan Commission Rules of Procedure as adopted and amended, and the cases that were legally advertised as scheduled for hearing on tonight's agenda.
Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
And let the record reflect that Mr. Enright Randolph has arrived and he is present.
So motion to approve the agenda.
Yes, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Right, there's been a second, so a vote yes is a vote to approve the introduction of evidence. Margaret Clements?
Yes.
Tron Enright Randolph?
Yes.
Scott Ferris?
Yes.
Rudy Fields?
Yes.
David Henry?
Yes.
Jeff Morris?
Yes.
Edward Ullman?
Yes.
Julie Thomas?
Yes.
And David Bush.
Yes.
All right, that carries 9-0.
Now, is there a motion to, are there other changes to tonight's agenda, Ms. Behrman? Okay, so is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda as posted and amended?
I move to approve tonight's agenda as Ms. Clements suggested a second ago with the amendments for tonight. That was a very bad motion.
That's okay. It's there. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. Ron Enright Randolph.
Sorry for being tardy. I just wanted a clarification. As amended,
Some items continued by petitioner. 3 items on the Holland Fields subdivisions. There are 3 items that have been continued.
okay, thank you. Yes.
Scott Ferris.
Yes.
Rudy Fields.
Yes.
David Henry.
Yes.
Jeffrey Morris.
Yes.
Edward Ullman.
Yes.
Julie Thomas.
Yes.
David Bush.
Yes.
And Margaret Clements.
Yes.
All right, that carries 9-0.
Okay, there are no minutes to approve. There's no administrative business to approve, and there's no unfinished business, so we're going to dive right into new business. So the first item on our agenda tonight is SPP-24-4. That's Southern Meadows Major Subdivision Preliminary Plat Amendment 2, and this is a preliminary hearing, and they've requested a waiver of final hearing, and this pertains to 95 parcels on 37 plus or minus acres in sections 20 and 21 of Perry Township at South Rogers Street and South College Drive. And I believe that Mr. Myers will be reviewing this with us. So thank you.
Thank you.
So this is SPP-24-4. It's the Southern Meadows Major Subdivision Preliminary Plat Amendment 2. The purpose of this amendment is to change the phasing schedule for the major subdivision for the remaining phases. Those are phases 4 through 6. Phases 1, 2, and 3 have been final platted, and construction on building homes on those lots is ongoing. So the petitioner has provided some information about the rationale for the amendment. They're stating that cul-de-sacs in phases 4 and 5, as originally platted and planned for, are designed for walkout basements. And they stated in their letter, for various economic conditions, walkout basements are not the preferred choice for homeowners at this time. The petitioner's amended phasing schedule does include the build-out of the road connection to South College Drive under phase 4. And the petitioner is also requesting moving the required South Old State Road 37 improvements from phase 4 to phase 6. So on the screen, you can see phases 4, 5, and 6 as proposed with their new configurations with certain lots that will be incorporated into each of those phases. So essentially, phase 6 will be split up into 2 non-contiguous sections with a total of 10 lots. Phase 4 will also be split up into 2 non-contiguous sections with a total of 16 lots. And you will note that this does now include the construction of the road connection to South College Drive. At the last Plan Commission admin meeting in January, there was some discussion regarding the build out of this connection to South College Drive. And there was some miscommunication, a moment of oversight from staff where we missed a letter submission from the petitioner that indicated their commitment to connecting that roadway to South College Drive as originally requested by the Plat Committee back in December. So we do apologize for missing that letter, but we have a new updated letter and a new updated phasing schedule that you can see on the screen that shows phase 4 in green, phase 5 in blue, and phase 6 in purple. And as I stated before, phase 6 will, the petitioner is requesting that they have the South Old State Road improvements in that phase instead of phase 4 as part of this amendment. So that is one change with respect to the offsite improvements for this petition. So this was a petition that was submitted before the new county development ordinance was approved. So we do review the subdivision control ordinance from the 1997 ordinance with respect to this proposal. The approval of this preliminary plat amendment will retain the original plan for the roadway connection, as I stated, for South College Drive. Let's see, the asphalt side path to Clear Creek Elementary will remain with phase 6 as well. Another some summary of offsite improvements. This is from the written commitment that was originally approved in 2020, I believe. Yes. The offsite improvements by recorded written commitment are as follows: a turn lane on South Rogers Street to access the subdivision. This was originally supposed to occur in phase 1. The turn lane to access South Orchard Lane from South Old State Road 37. That's currently planned for phase 4, but would become phase 6 under this amendment. The asphalt side path connection to Clear Creek Elementary, currently phase 6, and will remain with phase 6. And finally, the multi-use path along South Rogers Street that terminates at the south end of the Blind Squirrels property. That is originally proposed for phase 1 as well. Additionally, we have original conditions of approval for this proposal. The prior approval of the subdivision had several conditions of approval that were required as part of that petition, and they are enumerated here on the screen. This is all included in the packet as well. I'll go to the ones that are highlighted in red. So number 2, before certificate of occupancy, each lot must submit engineered as-built plans of the developed lot for approval by the MS4 coordinator, also known as the stormwater program manager. This condition particularly has been an issue for the petitioner in the past, and the county has filed a lawsuit against Winery Construction for failure to comply with this condition, and we have the case number there on the screen related to that. I'm going to continue on to the other ones that are of note. The petitioner, number 7, the petitioner submit written commitments for offsite work to be conducted with approval of this project. If this amendment to change the phasing is approved, the written commitment will be required to be amended to update the timing of required off-street improvements associated with phases 4 through 6, specifically the change from phase 4 to phase 6 with respect to the South Old State Road 37 turn lane. Number 8, the developer commits to grant sinkhole conservancy areas per Chapter 829 should new sinkholes surface prior to lot development. A geotechnical engineer must be present on site during initial mass grading of any phase, especially during road and detention pond construction. If an issue arises, the petitioner's engineer will be required to notify staff and provide any alternate plans. This has not come up, and staff is wanting clarification as to whether a geotechnical engineer has been present with the build out of the subdivision thus far. So that concludes the written commitments and the conditions of approval. So a bit of background and some other information regarding this subdivision, where we're at today. As I stated, in 2020, the original Southern Meadows major subdivision was approved that created 98 lots across 6 phases. In August 2020, the Plan Commission approved an amendment to accommodate a land transfer with the adjacent property owned by Blind Squirrels. In April of 2022, phase 1 was recorded. That included the West That Road extension, lots 31 through 32, 68 through 77, and 1 common area lot. In August of 2022, the Plan Commission approved a preliminary plat extension that allowed the developer to final plat all phases by the final date of August 18th, 2028. And then in September of 2022, phase 2 was recorded. That's lots 23 through 30 and 50 through 67. And in August of 2023, phase 3 was recorded, which is lots 2 through 9, 16 through 22, and 46 through 49. Current county permit records indicate that approximately 75% of phase 1 is built out, 64% of phase 2, and 74% of phase 3. So on the next few slides, I have some information regarding the active subdivision improvement agreements for this major subdivision pertaining to phases 1, 2, and 3 that have all been platted. So if we need to have any questions about each of these, we can come back to them. They all are each still on file, and there are some improvements that are still necessary in order for the petitioner to request a release or a release and an ultimate acceptance into the county inventory. I will note that the petitioner has not requested any reductions for any of these SIAs at this time, although some improvements have been completed with respect to roadways and other public improvements. So this is phase 1 with the highlighted parcels there. Phase 2 and phase 3. And you will note that on each of these slides, the final date for completion of the public improvements is August 18th, 2026. Okay, on the screen now we have just a diagram or aerial image of the parcels in question that are undergoing this amendment. So the yellow portion up here and then the blue portion down here, those are all the, phases 4, 5, and 6 all occur within those 2 parcels. And then we have some aerial imagery as well, just showing the current state of the site. These are aerial imagery from March of 2024. So you can see home construction continues throughout the subdivision phases. Okay, moving on to interdepartment comments. The Highway Department provided comments regarding this project and amendments proposal. Improvements to South Rogers Street are past due. They were supposed to be completed in September of 2024. Overall, the Highway Department does not support any more phases until this work is completed. The improvements to South Old State Road 37 were to be completed as part of Phase 4, and Phase 4 was to provide access to South College Drive, which, as I stated, will be maintained in Phase 4 with this update to the amendment proposal. But again, South Old State Road 37 improvements will be bumped to Phase 6. The Highway Department does not support the change of phasing and would like to keep Phase 4 as is. And then finally, the project manager from the Highway Department stated that, quote, roadway improvements along South Old State Road 37 and South Rogers Street and the connection to South College Drive should be completed before any changes to phasing should be approved. I do have concerns with the connection not being made to South College Drive due to the intersection of South Rogers Street and West That Road occasionally flooding. More on that flooding detail in a minute. Okay, so now we have stormwater comments. Stormwater noted that the developer has incorrectly installed the curb inlets on West That Road nearest the intersection of South Rogers Street. However, upon construction of the required South Rogers Street turn lane, it's their understanding that this error can be corrected, and the developer is encouraged to contact the stormwater program with questions. Moving on to the floodplain administrator comments for this amendment. I'll note that the original preliminary plat was approved again in 2020. This was before the acting floodplain administrator was serving in that role, so therefore she was not a reviewer of that original preliminary plat. And the preliminary plat may not have met ordinance standards with regards to floodplain concerns during that time. So on the screen, I have snippets from the subdivision control ordinance at that time, chapter 856 and chapter 808 specifically, which basically states that a subdivision proposed within the floodplain shall be preserved and shall not be diminished in capacity by filling or obstruction. No building site may be located within the floodway. And then letter B of 856-34. Any new subdivision proposing sole access subject to flooding for substantial periods of time that impede the ability of emergency and public services to adequately serve created lots is prohibited, and this requirement should not be waived. And then chapter 808-5, the standards for subdivision proposals, letter C, number 6. All subdivision proposals shall ensure safe access into/out of special flood hazard areas for pedestrians and vehicles, especially emergency responders. So at the time when this preliminary plat was approved, only phase 1 had that connection to West That Road and South Rogers Street, and the remaining connection to South College Drive was initially placed in phase 4. So essentially the subdivision started off with only phase 1 having a sole access point through what seemed to be floodway. According to the DNR Indiana Flood Information Portal, the base flood elevation is 659.37 feet to 660.31 feet for locations in Clear Creek, just north of the West That Road, and the shown in orange square, that's in relation to a diagram in the packet. According to the DNR flood analysis and regulatory assessment, the base flood elevation is 660.5 feet, and the ground elevation to gain entry to the Southern Meadows development from South Rogers Street and West That Road intersections is below the base flood elevation. So that FARA assessment that I just mentioned, the diagram is on the page now on the screen, and that blue dot is the point of interest that indicates where the ground elevation is as well as base flood elevation. And then on the right side of the screen is engineered plans from the original preliminary plat that shows those base flood elevations being exceeded in these areas. So it is within the flood area. Additional comments from the floodplain administrator, and there's more in the packet as well, more detail. The intersection at West That Road and South Rogers Street has not been improved, and specifically the new turn lane, which requires the widening of the road. Previous state and local flood permits have expired. In January of 27th, 2025, staff received a 71-page floodplain modeling report from professional engineers with the firm Webster, McGrath, and Allberg. Fill added to the floodplain from the Southern Meadows lots 60, 61, and 62 did result in a detectable rise of 0.01 feet related to, and this is also related to an active enforcement case that the planning department has related to this fill in a floodway situation. So based on that detectable rise, a conditional letter of map revision, or CLOMR, will need to be submitted, to the FEMA for review before work on the intersection at South Rogers Street and West That Road can proceed. So according to the floodplain administrator's experience, the issuance of a conditional letter of map revision can take at least a year to get through the system with FEMA. All right. Moving on to the petitioner's letter. This is dated January 23, 2025, and this is the most up-to-date letter that staff has with respect to the new phasing plan for the remaining phases of the Southern Meadows major subdivision. Again, in this letter, they articulate which lots specifically will be incorporated into the phasing schedules for phase 4, 5, and 6. They also state that the South Old State Road 37 improvements will be moving from phase 4 to phase 6. And they also give some rationale as to why the proposal is before you this evening. And then, let's see here. According to the map that they provided us, it does indicate that South College Drive connection will occur in phase 4. So now on the screen, I have the original phasing schedule from the Southern Meadows major subdivision, and then now the amended phasing schedule that you've seen already before. Phase 4 is separated, is split into 2, as well as phase 6, but phase 5 remains contiguous. And based on conversations with planning staff and with the petitioner, the way that the phasing schedule had to work out is you had to have at least 10 lots within each phase. So that's why there's the splitting of the phases as such on the screen. And there was nothing in the subdivision control ordinance that detailed that you couldn't have non-contiguous phases within a subdivision. Now on the screen, I included the original results letter for the first approval of the Southern Meadows major subdivision that detailed all of the conditions of approval. And then also on the screen, I included a copy of the written commitments that are recorded for the offsite improvements for the subdivision. All right, so that brings me to staff's recommendation. Staff is recommending denial of the preliminary plat amendment to alter the phasing for the following reason. 1, the petitioner has failed to comply with the recorded written commitment stating that certain improvements would be completed under earlier phases. Under this amendment to the phasing, it requests further delay under the written commitment to change the turn lane on South Old State Road 37 to be included in phase 6 instead of phase 4, despite the connection to South College Drive now being proposed in phase 4. Staff does see the latest phasing plan as an improvement. Should the Plan Commission seek to approve the amended phasing, we would ask that the applicant state the date in which they plan to install each improvement required under the written commitment and change the timing of the South Old State Road 37 turn lane from phase 6 to phase 4. And then additional turn lane on South Rogers Street to access the subdivision, additional turn lane to access Orchard Lane from South Old State Road 37, the asphalt side path connection to Clear Creek Elementary, and the multi-use asphalt path along South Rogers, terminating at the south end of the Blind Squirrels LLC property. Those are the summary of the offsite improvements that staff is seeking a timeline for completion. I will now take any questions.
Hey, do members of the Plan Commission have questions for staff? I will look to my left first and then to my right. Colonel Ferris and then Mr. Enright Randolph.
I would like to see an overhead and possibly use the picture on page 18. Show where the connectors actually connect. I could find of an overhead, I think that could do that.
On page 18, I think this is on page 8, this one.
Can you show me on the map where the two connectors actually come out?
Sure. So we have West That Road and South Rogers Street intersection. So that is the primary entrance to the subdivision. And then at the yellow polygon to the north end of the property, there is to be a connection to South College Drive approximately in this area. And then on the south end, there is a road stub that is part of, I believe, phase 5. I'll have to check back on the map because there is also a previously approved and in waiting subdivision known as the Shermer major subdivision that would be occurring here that would also provide a third access point between the two.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Enright Randolph?
Yeah, sorry. Would you bring that slide back up with the recommendation from Highway? And I'm not sure if Mr. Ayers is here to speak to it, but I guess the bullet point for the highway department does not support the change of the phasing and keep the phase as is. And I don't want to go down too many hypotheticals, but if they were able to address all the other concerns, all the outstanding improvement projects, I don't understand the reasoning behind the highway department's not supporting changing any of the phasing. It seems a bit, I'm a little uncertain, and it's a bit ambiguous to me. If they were able to address the other things there, why the phasing would be something they wouldn't support.
I don't believe Ben is on the call, but I do believe Lisa Ridge is.
Hi, Tron. So our biggest concern is we have received numerous complaints for the traffic that has increased in this area. This was a commitment that was made when this subdivision was approved, and the commitment did not happen. And we failed to keep moving forward without commitments being made and the promises being not completed. Then we don't support the change. We had a deadline in there for a reason, because we knew the increase in traffic for the subdivision, and that's exactly what has happened.
Right, and let me, I guess, maybe clarify my question. If the improvements were in place, the through road was built, the way that this looks is they just don't support any changing of the phasing, and I still don't see what is the real issue. I understand that, yes, we want to see the turn blister. Yes, we want to see the through road. Yes, we want to kind of maybe address all the other concerns. But I just don't understand if I'm maybe reading this wrong, or just a hands down, no, they don't support any changing of the phasing.
Is that a question for Ms. Ridge?
Well, not really. It might just be the way that this is kind of being presented, and if any other member reads it different, please let me know. But what I'm taking it, regardless of fixing all the issues that exist, they just won't support any adjustment of the current proposed phasing.
Well, I believe that Ms. Ridge has answered the question, but Mr. Myers, if you would...
She answered that these things haven't been completed, they're not installed. So again, it's more of a hypothetical. And it doesn't have to be a question, but quite yet, let's address all the other issues and maybe readdress this down the road, because I too have the concerns of wanting to see all those improvements in place, but I don't understand the kind of just the blanketed, they don't support adjusting the phases.
As presented and requested by the petitioner, one of the changes to the phasing plan is the moving of the improvements to South Old State Road 37 from Phase 4 to Phase 6. And the Highway Department mentions that as one of the things that they would like to keep in Phase 4. Same with planning. We would like to keep that improvement within Phase 4. So as it's presented by the petitioner, they are wanting to move that to Phase 6. And I have not heard otherwise from them at this time. They might have more information to share during this meeting, but that was what was submitted, and that is a reason for...
I completely read the recommendations and kind of see how you want to keep that intact, and I support that. Again, I might just be interpreting what I see on that slide as like just a no, we don't support any phasing, even if everything staff is recommending is achieved. So I'll just leave it there.
Okay, and Mr. Henry has his hand raised. I'd like to recognize him, and then Commissioner Thomas, and then Mr. Ullman.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, President there. So I have a similar, I guess, line of thinking, Tron. Maybe I have a different maybe question here. So it seems like in the splitting of phase 6 to split out phase 6 at the cul-de-sac in the north west quadrant there, and to complete the through road, would that not alleviate traffic on that road while we're waiting FEMA's adjudication of the floodplain? Like, is that? I mean, I'm speculating as if that's the rationale for wanting to complete the through road while we wait on a year's worth of adjudication from FEMA. Is that, Drew? Is that part of the? Is that rationale been presented as to why that through road should be completed now and as opposed to waiting?
The completion of the through road to South College Drive would certainly alleviate traffic congestion. However, I do not know, and I cannot speak to how promptly the petitioner can complete that extension.
So if that was a condition in the timeline for completion, like what would the completion of the through road be as part of this? I guess I would be adding a timeline for completion section, unless you feel like that's covered in one of the one of the statements of timeline for completion. Does that make sense?
It sounds like there
Right,
could be an additional written commitment as part of the amendment. But again, the existing written commitments will have to be amended to compensate for the change in the South Old State Road 37 improvements if those were to go forward.
Yeah, I'll finish my thought here. It strikes me as just a practical matter that if we are looking at a stormwater remediation or a adjudication from FEMA, like that traffic flow isn't going to change anytime soon, and if we don't work toward the throughway, it's not going to change anytime soon. And so if there's a release or on the pressure of the traffic pattern that can be achieved in at least getting that aspect of this through, that strikes me as interesting to try to aim for a goal there. But that's my thought there. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Commissioner Thomas, did you have your hand raised?
I did earlier, and then I put it down because I thought that Mr. Myers had addressed my question, but now I'm glad you called on me. So I agree with what Councilor Henry says about getting this roadway toward College Drive done as soon as possible. Obviously, that's, there are houses, there are residents. This is an access for emergency vehicles. But it's confounding to me that we're in a situation where there was a permit to get this work done to connect this subdivision to Rogers and that, and the permit has been allowed to lapse, and in fact the situation is now worse than it was at the beginning. Slightly worse, not terribly worse. So I have a lot of concerns, and I think one of the things I would like to say at this juncture is that it may be best if we don't agree with what's been presented, if we can send this back to be worked out between staff and the petitioner, stormwater and highway, instead of trying to do it at this meeting, because I don't think we're going to achieve what we want to achieve. We're going to miss something, is my fear. So I just want to throw that nugget out there and ask folks to think about that. So I appreciate that. I usually don't comment this early. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Mr. Ullman?
I have a question, or maybe more of a point of clarity, or just for my own sake, and might be beneficial to others on the board. But for Mr. Schilling, there's a lot going on this particular petition or this project. A lot of different things. Drew did a phenomenal job presenting everything, but there's some aspects that were presented involving various court cases and things that maybe don't have direct pertinence to the phasing schedules and everything else. And I guess I want to make sure that when I am deliberating on this or thinking on this, is there anything that is per se like off limits or off bounds that we should not be considering as part of this petition, though it involves the subdivision as a whole, maybe might not involve the individual phasing, just because I know there's ongoing court cases and things. So if my question isn't very clear, I can try to clear it up, but.
Well, I believe that if you're asked for an approval, that you can require or make conditions or accept commitments relating to defects that exist in the project as a condition for moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even though the defect might not pertain, like in particular, I'm thinking about how there's been houses have been moved into without being cleared by all the proper channels, and that, you know, maybe doesn't directly pertain to phase 4, 5, 6 or road blisters or anything, but that's still, you know, an aspect of this entire project. Is that data that we should be allowing into our deliberation or not?
Well, those are matters that I think are being addressed through the lawsuits, but matters like correcting the storm inlet, you know, getting the clomer quickly, those things are legitimate, I believe, conditions and commitments.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that I'm looking through the proper lenses for this.
Thank you. Mr. Bush?
Yes, I have a few questions. First, for staff. Since I was not on this commission when this was originally approved, was there any retention or detention basins designed into the stormwater plan for the overall site? I thought, as a citizen, I was kind of watching this, and I thought there was something to do with that, but I don't see any mention of it.
I don't know off the top of my head where the detentions or the stormwater infrastructure is located. There is some in phase 2, the northern section, the northwest section specifically, and then phase 4 as well, the south west section as well is stormwater detention.
Because I'm concerned if you're looking at developing phases 4, 5, that I think needs to be done sooner rather than later, because you know, the detention basin is at the base of what will be a large excavated area. So, you know, I'd like to see attention paid to that. Next question I have, the off-site improvements that were pledged to be taken care of as part of the recorded written commitment. How many of those have been achieved?
That's a good question. So this is the summary on this page of those off-site improvements via the written commitment. So the turn lane, as we've stated, on South Rogers Street to access the subdivision, that was originally proposed as being part of phase 1, so that is still incomplete. The turn lane to access South Orchard Lane from South Old State Road 37, that's currently part of phase 4, so naturally they haven't reached that stage yet, but they are proposing to bump that from phase 4 to phase 6. There's also 2 side paths, asphalt side paths. The multi-use path along South Rogers Street along the Blind Squirrels property, that was originally supposed to be part of phase 1 as well. That's incomplete. And then the asphalt side path to connecting Clear Creek Elementary on the south side of the property, that's currently proposed in phase 6 and will remain with phase 6.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the commissioners to staff? Yes, Mr. Colonel Ferris.
I'm not going to go over my list. Those are all the questions I have based upon what we're reviewing. There are any number of issues here. Safety is first and foremost in my mind. And that's why I asked the question about the connectors. Because if you truly have an entrance, and that entrance is subject to flooding, and you do not have a place to escape through that neighborhood, that is a problem. So there's a sense of urgency to take and build those roadways. I do want to point out, after looking at the most recent letter, I got to go to it here, the letter dated 23rd of January. I just want to highlight in that first paragraph where it says, currently phases 1, 2, and 3 have been completed. Well, they haven't been completed. So that's a question for the petitioner or whomever prepared this letter to get up here. Because if they were completed, then a lot of these things that were due, that were not done, would have been completed prior to this point in time. So to me, that's a huge disconnect. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Ferris. Well, if there are no further questions of the staff, then we'll turn to the petitioner. And if the petitioner and/or his representative would come to the podium and sign in, you'll have 15 minutes to present the petition. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I should.
Yes, hi, I'm Todd Borden with Smith Design Group.
That's right. Thank you. It's nice to see you again.
Yes, thank you, staff. Thank you, members of the Plan Commission. I know most of you are well aware of this project, so I won't spend too much time going through the past history of it. Everyone knows what we've asked for and what's been asked of us as far as Plat Committee and in the Plan Commission admin meetings. So to start off with that, obviously we have agreed to put in the South College Drive connection. And I will also state today that we will pull our amendment for the Old Road State Road 37, move to phase 6, and we will move those back to phase 4. And if this is approved and we can get through the process quick enough, we can hope that we can have not only the South College Drive, but the Old State Road 37 improvements in yet this year to alleviate the traffic on Rogers Road, as well as the safety concern as far as the potential flooding on Rogers Road. So that leaves, to me, the main issue is the improvements on Rogers Road. Obviously, right now, we have lost our IDEM permit. You know, delays happen in construction, and those improvements were not put in, and now we have lost our IDEM permit. We are working with staff and with Ms. Bierman. We finished the engineering study, and yes, we did find that it did cause a 0.001% rise, or 0.01% rise, but unfortunately, that does not meet IDEM's requirement for 0.00. Ms. Bierman has also pointed out that there is a possibility that we could try to find a place to alleviate this problem by moving soil somewhere else to lower the no rise. That would most likely be a quicker process than the Clomar, but we still intend on filing for the Clomar as soon as possible to get that process going in case we cannot alleviate the no rise another way. But I think throughout this process, the last 2 months, there's been some good conversation with staff. There was some great conversation at Plat Committee and some good stuff in Plan Commission admin as well. And I think that, you know, we have moved this petition much closer to what those representatives had wanted. And I think this is a good compromise that's taken place over the last 2 months. So if any of you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Okay, will other members of your group have anything to say? Because there's a total of 15 minutes and you have like almost 13 remaining.
You know, I agree with Commissioner Thomas. I mean, I think this has been talked about enough over the last 2 months that I don't think that there's a real need to go deep into it. It's pretty simple. You know, walkout basements are not selling. Of the 40 homes, only one's been a walkout basement. You know, construction costs are high, interest rates are high. We do not see that changing. And this is a way to continue to build homes. And, you know, hopefully when we build out phase 6 and you're doing the walkout basements, that needs came back in the economy and for home builders, and they'll be able to sell.
Thank you, Mr. Borgman. Now, I'd like to ask members of the Plan Commission if they have questions. Yes, Mr. Enright Randolph?
Yes, this kind of goes back to another Plan Commission member's question. From what's being proposed, and I'm only able to find some preliminary plats, so they could have been amended, but was there any bioretention or on any of these phases that are being asked to shift around?
No, all the retention that was going to be in for phase 4 will be installed.
And I guess just quickly, I think Commissioner Thomas was right that there's a lot going on and we don't want to miss anything, especially something as important as like bioretention. And, I think if we were really able to address a lot of the concerns that have been brought up by staff, stormwater and highway, I'd be comfortable with supporting the changing of the phasing, but that might mean we should consider continuing this so we can have all of that cleaned up. No further questions, just wanted to kind of share my thought of why I asked the first question.
Do other members of the Plan Commission have questions for Mr. Borgman? Mr. Morris?
Yeah, I have one. Drew, could you pull up the recommended motion for me? My question, Mr. Borgman, is under the recommended motion, there are 3 timelines that are requested. And my question for you is, would you be willing to commit to dates on each of those 3, even if not right now, but at a future meeting where we could discuss them?
So as far as, I'll go in different orders, but as far as the access to Orchard Lane and State Road 37, both of those would be completed with phase 4. And as far as I consider the Rogers Path and the Rogers Turn Lane as the same, improvements to Rogers Road, they will be completed within 9 months of an approved CLOMAR, or if we can determine that we can alleviate the no rise by moving dirt somewhere else.
Mr. Henry, your hand is raised.
Thank you, President Clemens.
Would you kindly turn on your video? Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
It was a little delay. We're good. So my only question for petitioner, I guess, is along the lines of the timeline commitment, and just so that I think the next time we see this here, if it does go back to staff and you all to work out, is that was the qualification for timeline presented to you when you gave the letter? Because that was that added after you submitted your second letter? So that's the first question. And then the second question really is just to make sure that whatever the next iteration of this is before the board, that we've answered those questions before we send it back. So was the timeline requirement, or were you aware of that timeline requirement after the second letter was submitted?
So I'm assuming you mean the timeline for the Rogers Road improvements?
Yeah, the three questions that staff has asked to consider for timeline. Were you, because it strikes me that you submitted a letter of intent or of agreement, and then we had timeline questions added at some point. Were you aware of a commitment to commit to a timeline to complete those when you submitted the letter?
So actually, there is no timeline for the Orchard Road extension or the State Road 37 extension. Those were just to be included with phase 4, and we are agreeing to complete both of those with phase 4. So essentially, those should no longer apply moving forward. As far as the Rogers Road, yes, we knew there was a timeline, and the construction work was scheduled. And unfortunately, it got late in the year, and then Ms. Bierman noticed that our IDEM permit expired, and we were not allowed to install those improvements past the time, the expiration of the IDEM permit.
Okay. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Are there any other questions for Mr. Borgman? No? Okay, then we will turn this over to the public. If there are members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition, please come to the podium or raise your virtual hand. You'll have 3 minutes each. There's no one. I don't see, I can't really tell if anyone is raising their virtual hand. Okay, so if there's a member of the public who is opposed to this petition and this request, please come to the podium in the Nat Hill room or raise your virtual hand. See anyone? So there's no need for a rebuttal. We return to the Plan Commission for further discussion and/or a motion. Mr. Ullman?
I have a question for Ms. Bierman, if I may. And perhaps Drew touched on this and I missed it, and I apologize if so, but has there been anything from the stormwater side or the bioretention side on if these walkout basement structures were to change to being, I'm assuming, on slab and no longer walkout basement. My understanding of construction that changes your topography around the house, and anything in terms of if the bioretention that exists or is planned, if it will still be pertinent, or if the layout of everything from a stormwater perspective will still apply, or is there any concerns in that world?
I mean, every permit that's for a residence is submitted on a certified plot plan, which has to have a licensed engineer stamped approval. And those are reviewed as a part of the construction general stormwater permit that the stormwater program reviews. So I think that if there was going to be a change from build on slab versus walkout basement, that there could be some feedback regarding if it's going to get incorporated into the drainage easements properly and be able to get to those drainage basins. So.
Thank you.
There is also a portion in the staff report on page 5 that talks about a required submission for a preliminary plat is a grading plan for phases. It's at the bottom of the page. And the petitioner had submitted a previously approved grading plan, which did have some, will require alterations given what was completed for phases 1, 2, and 3, as the grades on those phases did not follow the approved grading plan for those phases. The site does contain a lot of bedrock and other features, which has altered individual lot grades and has resulted in overall differences throughout those phases that have been constructed.
Thank you very much, Cam Andrew.
Colonel Ferris?
Is there a list of everything that needs to be done anywhere in that package? I'm talking about the, I don't know, half dozen to maybe a dozen items which need to be done. Is there a list that we could look at so we can take and hopefully put that in writing or some sort of agreement so the petitioner could actually address them and so we see them at the next meeting? Or if we don't have that list, can we make that list?
Certainly, staff can work on compiling a list of known deficiencies or known, lack of completing a certain written commitment or offsite improvement. As I stated before, the offsite improvements, we've listed those several times in the packet, as well as the conditions of approval of the original subdivision are included in the packet. But there are a number of likely deficiencies with respect to the build out of the subdivision that staff is not fully aware of, and that would come up through the review procedures of the petitioner requesting reductions or releasing of their subdivision improvement agreements. Because at that time of that process stage, we look at as-built, official as-built documents to evaluate those things. But I will state that, and I think it's mentioned in the packet, that stormwater has been made aware of, changes to grading plans that were originally approved that have changed with the changing of certain housing types, as well as the certain inlet structures along the West Road extension.
I'm looking for a punch list. You know what I mean when I say that? That's what I'm looking for. These are the items, this is what the plan is, and this is what the suspense or completion date might be. That would be very helpful for this project because this is complicated. And obviously there's still a lot of questions on it. And it would be very helpful if we had answers to those questions so we could make an informed decision. At least that's my particular perspective on this. Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments by members? I know that Mr. Ullman indicated that he would be prepared to make a motion.
Kind of a personal comment before the motion, but personally, I really liked some of the statements made or the structure that planning put together in their recommendation amendment, I'll call it. that we see on the screen there about some additional commitments requiring timeline and stuff. I also really liked Commissioner Thomas's comment about how we don't need to deliberate on this too much if we know that we want the petitioner to discuss more with planning. And I think that if we could get some solid dates committed, especially on the 3 items that are identified by planning, that would be very helpful for all of us. But in the case of SPP-24-4 Southern Meadows Major Subdivision Preliminary Plat Amendment 2, I motion for a continuation, and that planning and the petitioner reconvene and restructure with some more solidified timeline and commitments.
Second.
And I guess a different way to maybe word that is to deny the waiver of final hearing, or wait, to, yeah.
Yeah, a friendly amendment to your motion is to just deny the waiver of final hearing, and then it'll automatically go to the next Plan Commission hearing.
That works for me too.
Does that meet with the friendly amendment? Does that meet with the approval of, I think it was Mr. Henry who seconded?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so there's been a motion and a second to deny the waiver of final hearing. A vote in favor is a vote to continue this to the meeting that would be in March. Let's see, I just want to get that out there. March 18th, 2025. All right, I will call the roll. Julie Thomas,
Yes.
Edward Ullman,
Yes.
Jeffrey Morris,
Yes.
David Henry,
Yes.
Rudy Fields,
Yes.
Scott Barris,
Yes.
Tron Enright Randolph, Margaret Clements,
Yes?
and David Bush.
Yes.
All right, that's a unanimous vote, 9-0. This will come back to us in March after some deliberations.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Winiger, for coming today. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the second item on the agenda, which is SPP-24-5, Highland Park Estates Major Subdivision Phase 5 Preliminary Plat. This is a preliminary hearing, and a waiver of final hearing has been requested concerning one parcel on 4.16 plus or minus acres in Richland Township, Section 13. And the owner is Highland Park Estates. Mr. Smith, if you would kindly review this case with us, we'd be most grateful.
Sure.
Okay, so the request before you is a 5-lot major subdivision with one common area, also known as open space, and a waiver of final hearing. The purpose is to receive approval for the Highland Park Estates Phase 5 subdivision preliminary plat to be able to continue work that is required for final platting, including a waiver of road width to Appendix 856-1, which is the street cross-section drawings. Highland Park Estates Phases 3, 4, and 5 received a preliminary plat approval on September 19th, 2017. Phases 3 and 4 were final platted and recorded on June 20th, 2018 and October 7th, 2020, respectively. The preliminary plat approvals are only valid for 2 years after the approval date before they must be final platted. Phase 5 never underwent this final platting process, and therefore it was never recorded and has since expired. There are no changes from the original 2017 request, other than that phases 3 and 4 do not need to be included since they have already received final plat approval. So just a little background on this subdivision. So again, Phase 5 did receive approval in 2017 as well as 2019, but the plat expired both times. Phase 5 also received a preliminary plat extension in 2021 and the final plat application was applied for that same year. However, no financial guarantee was ever submitted as a requirement of the application, and then that preliminary plat also expired on December 16th, 2023. The subdivision, as presented, appears to conform to all major subdivision ordinance requirements, with the exception of the road width waiver. And just as a reminder, you're reviewing this subdivision under the prior 1997 ordinance, not the county development ordinance that was recently adopted in December. So there is a remaining sidewalk, 4 feet in width, required on both sides of Hall Drive, which is the location of this Phase 5. And that connects to the existing sidewalks in completed Phase 4, as well as the Ellettsville jurisdiction sidewalks to the north of Phase 5. So a total of six street trees required and have been installed. And drainage for this project was already previously reviewed by the Monroe County Stormwater Program, but as well as the Drainage Board. And that Drainage Board meeting was August 2nd, 2017. So some background on the road width waiver. So as stated previously, this preliminary plat is requesting a road width waiver. And this was also part of the original 2017 and 2019 requests. The road width and design do meet the Highway Department's manual for construction in the right-of-way. However, Chapter 856, which again is under the previous ordinance of the subdivision control ordinance, contains a more restrictive cross-section, and that is necessitating this waiver. So under that ordinance, we would require 31 feet. What is being proposed is 26 feet. The county development ordinance that was adopted in December relies solely on the Highway Department's ordinance and manual, which was adopted in 2020. And that essentially removed the requirement from the planning ordinance. So if this was being reviewed under the current CDO, this would otherwise not be a requirement. Since this application was filed, of course, the road width waiver stands, and that is why they are here, for that specific purpose. So the subdivision control ordinance identified as the urban local road guideline. So again, requires 31 feet with a 2-foot curb and 2-foot gutter, and a 50-foot right-of-way. The highway manual requires 26 feet. And that is actually what the highway engineer is recommending, is that a narrower road, 26 feet in width, with 2-foot curb and gutter, with a total of 30 foot wide, to accommodate street parking and meet county highway standards. So on the screen, on the left-hand side is what the petitioner is proposing. And then on the right-hand side is what the Monroe County Highway Department would require. And just for some context, for this area in particular, Highland Park Estates, Phase 2, and the subdivision to the north, which is Centennial Park, but that is under Ellettsville jurisdiction, both have 24-foot wide roadways, which are narrower than the 26 feet that is being recommended by the county highway engineer. A further discussion is that planning staff did note that there do appear to be discrepancies between the cross-section proposal, which is shown below, where you have 13 feet on both sides for a total of 26, and the plan set and the physical roadway, which is shown to the right. So again, the highway engineer recommended 26 feet, but the physical roadway and the plat map show it as being approximately 24 feet. So based on the meeting minutes from the original preliminary plat approval, the Plan Commission voted to approve the road width waiver with the intention that it would follow the Highway Department's recommendation of 26 feet. So planning staff is seeking to verify with with the petitioner whether the road was built to the 26-foot requirement or 24 feet. But just regardless, if it's 24 or 26, for the purposes of this request, they do still have to request that road width waiver from the Plan Commission because we required it to be 31 feet wide at the time. And then, like I said previously, on the bottom, we have what the petitioner submitted. And then on the right-hand side, we have an aerial image where I measured the roadway width. And then on further to the right, we have what the plat map that the petitioner submitted is showing. So both the GIS and the plat appear to be showing 24 feet. And then on the screen is the proposed preliminary plat. So phase 5 is what we are focusing on. Phase 4, like I said, has already been final platted. So we've got the 5 lots to the north there, and then you just have one large common area dedicated for the open space requirements. And then these are just some staff site photos. You'll note that when this received prior approvals, this roadway did not exist yet, so this road is brand new. So planning staff did provide a positive recommendation. However, given light of the discrepancies between the 24 feet and the 26 feet, staff is going to amend their recommendation to recommend denial of the waiver of final hearing until we can acquire that necessary information. So basically the rationale for people who don't know, 2 feet you might not think is necessarily that much, but since these roadways are intended to be taken into the county road inventory, if the highway department is requiring them to be 26 feet, that might be problematic for the developer later on to get those roads accepted into the inventory. So planning staff just wants to be sure that the roadway will be accepted.
Thank you. Is that it? Okay.
Yes.
Then do members of the Plan Commission have questions for staff? Yes, Mr. Bush.
I have one question. The width of the road, 24 versus 26, is it physically spelled out in the prints and measured as such, or is it just assumed that it's going to be a certain width? I'm struggling with your GIS measurements versus what might have been submitted. And if it's submitted in the blueprints that it's 26, then my assumption would be that. So.
Yeah, so all of the engineered submitted plats are drawn to scale. So what is shown on the furthest to the right of the screen is directly from the plat itself that was submitted to staff. And what I'm doing is I'm just showing what it measures out to be. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Well, it does in a way, because I know from some previous experience that scaling changes, but if you've got a scale in the legend that is whatever 1 foot equals 100 or 1 inch equals 100 feet, then somewhere in the drawing, usually it's measured, pardon me, in a detail or something to where it's tied into where if someone makes a copy and it's a little bit larger, a little bit smaller, whatever, that doesn't impede the ability of the design to be accurate. So that's my question. I guess I'm just struggling with it.
I didn't catch the tail end of your conversation, and I don't know if I need to clarify anything, but like on the preliminary plat that we reviewed earlier this afternoon, just a few hours ago, in 2017, that cross-section is on the preliminary plat at 26 feet, but then the plat itself, the preliminary plat itself is really just measuring the 24 feet. So it was, but I don't think we ever saw on there a line that said 24 feet, which is possibly how it got overlooked by both the highway department, both planning, over the multiple times we have approved this. And it just caught our attention a couple of hours ago. So I think we want some clarification before it proceeds further.
I got to be the one that discovered it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That clears it up for me. Appreciate it.
Are there other questions for staff? Yes, Mr. Fields.
I don't understand a lot of the process, being a little new here, but are these roads built?
Yeah, these roads are built.
Okay, so if there are no further questions for staff, I can't see if Mr. Henry or Commissioner Thomas have their hands raised, but I don't believe they do. Mr. Butler, I assume you're here to represent the petitioner. If you would kindly sign in, and then you'll have 15 minutes to review this request with us.
All right, I'm Daniel Butler. I'm with Bynum Fanning Associates. I'm the civil engineer on this project. Just to give you a little context, this is a old plan set, and we've updated over the years, older than, been at the firm myself. So I think what has happened is there was a cross section, and it looks like the actual road width on the plans is different from that cross section. So it appears that they're correct, that got drawn at a 24 foot, and that's likely how they got built. I believe we submitted an as-built as well to planning staff with this petition as well. So the as-built should show what is actually out there. And the only thing that's not built is the sidewalks at this time. It's gotten approved with the road width waiver in the past, but it might have to have a road width waiver of 20 at this time, pending Highway Department's approval of that or recommendation of that.
Okay, do members of the Plan Commission have questions for Mr. Butler? No? Commissioner Thomas? Okay, we'll hear from the public now. Are there members of the public who are in favor of this petition? Please come to the podium or raise your virtual hand to be recognized. If there's no one who wishes to speak in favor, are there members of the public who would like to speak in opposition to this petition? Please raise your virtual hand or come to the podium in this Nat Hill courtroom. If not, then we come back to the members of the Plan Commission for further discussion and or a motion. So, yes, Mr. Enright Randolph.
I get. My feeling on this is to deny the waiver of final hearing, but I'm kind of curious if Highway has time to deliberate and they're comfortable with how it was built, and we as a Plan Commission are comfortable too, could we maybe move this item to our administrative meeting and make a final determination on it but I don't want to put anyone on the hot seat. If it's easier just to come back next month, it might be a good use of our time if everyone's comfortable, if Highway can support this and eventually take it into their inventory. That's kind of where my thoughts are.
Are there any other thoughts, Mr. Ullman?
I guess, I was thinking a similar train of thoughts, but maybe a little bit different structure. And I was wondering if it'd be possible to put in if we were to approve this with the condition that it meets Highway's approval based on the whole road width criteria, And if it doesn't, that it would come back to us to deliberate on at the next administrative meeting, or at the next formal meeting, either one, I guess. And that's what I was envisioning. I don't know if that a possibility, and I don't know if that would be Schilling or Tammy, or who would be the one to tell me if I'm on a right track or in left field.
Lisa Ridge is on camera now, and I think she would like to say, have a word.
Yes, Lisa, we'd like to hear from you. Thank you.
So, yeah, I would, I'm just now hearing, I was out in the field all day. I'm just now hearing that there was a discrepancy 2 hours ago. So if you do want to move forward with it, I would like to maybe discuss with Paul and make sure that he was aware of the discrepancy from today. And if we can approve it and support it, then I'm sure we will. But I hate for you to just go ahead with it, since I don't know what was determined today. So
I guess just, and I still feel motivated to approve this. However, I adamantly want Highway to weigh in. So I'd be happy to move it forward with a condition that says that if Highway is comfortable with it, then it passes on. If not, that it comes back to us to deliberate on, if that's possible.
Yeah, I think it would be better if you would obtain Highway's recommendation and then have the Plan Commission decide whether the safety factors that they discuss are sufficient to approve.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, having heard what Mr. Schilling said, I do think it would just be cleaner just to hear this again. What does that condition mean? It just is cleaner and simpler to wait.
No one else, I would be willing to make the motion to deny the waiver.
This is unusual, and we normally don't do this, but Mr. Butler, you're standing there, and I think you have something to say.
If you may.
Yes.
All right. The only other fact that I would add to this is this was not the intention by any means, but Centennial Park does have the same road width that we are supplying, and that was not necessarily the intention, but if that adds any to the conversation, whether at Highway or here, it does match exactly with 24 feet to the road to the north. So.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. I mean, that's kind of where my thought was going, is how are we going to handle this shape of a road? So, pardon me, Mr. Ullman? Colonel Ferris, and then Mr. Enright.
So Lisa, can you restate again what you said with respect to that roadway?
So if I was understanding right, that there was a discrepancy made a couple hours ago. I was not in the office today, so I can't speak on what that discrepancy was, how Paul reacted to it. So I hate for Highway to say that we're okay with everything when I don't have our engineer here. I prefer to do it like Dave had stated, moving forward, getting to make sure that we're all in line, and we talk to Paul before it's approved.
I will just add that I tried to reach out to Paul Satterley, the engineer, and I think he had already left for the day. The door was locked. So
this was a rapidly changing environment. Yes. So is there a motion, or Mr. Colonel Ferris, did you have another thing to add?
I don't think so. I think that we should accept, though, what Lisa said.
Exactly. Yeah.
I first want to say kudos to Mr. Smith for catching that. And then I would like to make a motion that we just deny the waiver of final hearing, and then this will just come back to us next month.
I'll second that.
Great, there's been a motion and a second to deny the waiver of final hearing and continue this to the March 18th, 2025 Plan Commission meeting. A vote in favor is to session again in March 18th. Edward Ullman?
Yes.
Jeffrey Morris?
Yes.
David Henry?
Yes.
Rudy Fields,
Yes.
Scott Ferris,
Yes.
Tron Enright Randolph,
Yes.
Margaret Clements,
Yes.
David Bush,
Yes.
and Julie Thomas.
Yes.
All right, motion carries 9-0.
Okay, thanks for the good work on that and for making things better for our community. Thank you. We're moving on to the third item on the agenda, and that's SPP-24-6. And this is Harding Place Major Subdivision Amendment 1, preliminary plat vacation, and a request has been made for a waiver of the final hearing. And this concerns 3 parcels on 43 plus or minus acres in Clear Creek Township, Section 17 at 965 West Harding Place Drive, 1001 West Harding Place Drive, and 1061 West Harding Place Drive. And Mr. Smith, if you would review this with us, I'd be grateful.
So as previously stated, this is a 3-lot preliminary plat amendment to the Harding Place subdivision, and its purpose is to add 1 additional lot to the subdivision and eliminate a section of previously dedicated right-of-way. So the petitioner is requesting to amend the subdivision, and his property is located at 1001 West Harding Place Drive, and the intention is to add that property to the subdivision and vacate said property from the Conrad and Parish Type E Administrative Subdivision, and that subdivision is SAD-24-21. So vacating that subdivision and acquiring the area that was previously dedicated as right-of-way will grant the property direct road frontage to West Harding Place Drive, which is the intent. This request also went to the county commissioners, so ordinance number 2025-01, which is the petition to vacate right-of-way, was approved and adopted by the county commissioners on January 16th, 2025. This eliminated previously dedicated right-of-way, and that was absorbed by lots 8 and 9 of the Harding Place subdivision. And the petitioner is currently in agreement with the owners of lots 8 and 9 to acquire that area that was previously dedicated as right-of-way from the owners, pending approval of this preliminary plat amendment. So some background on this petition. So all improvements to the Harding Place subdivision have been completed since its approval in September 28th, 1999. The original plat did receive several waivers, and I included those in the packet as well as on the screen. So things like block length waiver, sidewalk waiver, rear lot easements waiver, and street tree waivers were all granted by the Plan Commission in 1999. No additional subdivision improvements are required for the purpose of this particular amendment. No changes to the roadways or stormwater infrastructure are taking place. So the petitioner did apply for a stormwater grading permit, SW-25-2, for site preparation in what will be the proposed Lot 13. That is where he will be building his new residence, as well as that will include the new gravel driveway. The petitioner has secured electric and water service providers, as well as received an approved septic permit, WW-24-219, and that's from the Health Department. The Plat Committee did review this petition and recommended a positive recommendation to the Plan Commission with staff's conditions numbered as 2 and 3 in the report. Staff did have 3 originally, the first one being that the petitioner receive right-of-way vacation approval from the county commissioners. That was approved on the same day that the Plat Committee meeting occurred. So that's why in the packet that first condition is crossed out, because the petitioner did receive approval. So that condition is satisfied. On the screen, I have the location and site conditions map. When I first made these maps, our data had not yet been updated. So that's why I crossed out the sections that are not applicable. This is in Clear Creek Township. The site, Mr. Conrad's proposed Lot 13 does contain a number of karst features, including what appear to be, or I should say, karst conservancy areas and slopes that are greater than 25% slope. However, his lot is over 35 acres, so planning staff doesn't have any real concerns with finding buildable area on the lot. These are snippets of the preliminary plat. It is pretty massive. So on the left-hand side, you have kind of a zoomed out version. So we have proposed lots 8 and 9 at the top, and then lot 13, which is the larger parcel to the south. And then on the right-hand side, I have a zoomed in version. So earlier you heard me mention about the previously dedicated right-of-way. So that is the space that is in between lot, or I should say was between lot 8 and lot 9. That area has now been divided amongst lot 8 and 9, and should this preliminary plat amendment receive approval, that area will revert back to Mr. Conrad on lot 13. And then this is the original Harding Place subdivision preliminary plat. I think the idea was back in 1999 that they would leave that area previously dedicated as right-of-way in case someone in the future wanted to further develop the subdivision. This no longer occurred, and this is not Mr. Conrad's wishes. So what you see is what you get. On the screen currently is the Conrad and Parish Type E administrative subdivision, which is what Mr. Conrad is currently a part of. His lot is dedicated as Tract 1 on the screen. Should this receive approval, he will vacate from this administrative subdivision and become part of Harding Place. This is just a signed agreement between all applicable parties, so between the petitioner and the property owners of lots 8 and 9, essentially agreeing to go through this process as well as to revert that space back to Mr. Conrad. And this is the ordinance number 2025-01 that was adopted and passed by the county commissioners. These are some staff photos of the site. So the first picture is a picture of the cul-de-sac, and that driveway is what will become the petitioner's driveway. And the pictures essentially tell the story on the screen. So the further back you go, you get to the gravel driveway. That's Mr. Conrad's driveway. And then finally at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, that's the site preparation. So essentially that driveway leads to what will be the proposed Lot 13's buildable area where the residents will go. This leads me into staff's recommendation, which is recommending approval based on the findings of fact and that the preliminary plat does meet the subdivision control ordinance, subject to the highway engineer and stormwater program manager reports with the following conditions. One condition being that the signature blocks for all property owners involved in this amendment be added to the final plat, and that the signatures for the property owners in the Conrad and Parish Type E administrative subdivision agreeing to the plat vacation be added to the final plat as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Do members of the Plan Commission have questions for staff? This looks pretty straightforward. I don't see if Mr. Henry or Commissioner Thomas have their hands raised. I don't see them raised. if there are no questions, then we'll move to the petitioner. If the petitioner is here, please come to the podium, sign in, and you'll have 15 minutes to explain what you're requesting, you know, even though Mr. Smith did just such a wonderful job. Yes. Mr. Brian Conrad.
Yes, good
Thank
evening.
you. Good
Thank you.
evening.
And I think Mr. Smith did a fine job. I really have nothing else to add.
Okay, great. I'll ask my colleagues if they have questions for you. Do you have questions for Mr. Conrad? Okay. Then I'm going to turn it open to the public to see if there are any people who are either opposed to this or in favor of this. If so, please make yourself known by raising your virtual hand. And we see none. Do we see none? Okay.
We got a hand.
We have a hand. We have two hands. Okay, so there's the first person. If tech services could unmute the person indicated by the blue dot. I can't see if that's an A. And you may have to.
Yes, yes.
Yes, and
Can
what
you
is
hear
your
me?
name, sir?
My name is Scott Fleming, and I live in the Harding Place community and was sent one of these notes. I just want to be crystal clear. I'm not used to reading these kinds of documents with those kind of verbiage, and just want to make sure I'm clear. So this gentleman is just basically getting for lack of a better way of saying it, a driveway from the property to that cul-de-sac, and it's just going to be a one resident home, or is this going to be multiple homes on this 35 or 40 acre property?
There are three parcels that are in question here that we've discussed and that Mr. Smith reviewed with us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, to just kind of help clarify, so this area was previously dedicated as right-of-way with the intention that at some point somebody in the future might want to further develop the subdivision. This has not occurred since at least 1999. What Mr. Conrad has been doing and successfully received approval for is to vacate that right-of-way. So that right-of-way no longer exists. And that space has been reverted to the owners of lots 8 and 9. But pending approval of this preliminary plat amendment, that space would go back to Mr. Conrad, and that would just be part of his lot. So there would be no dedicated right-of-way, which means there would be no further development of the subdivision aside from his lot where he is planning on building his residence. And I can help answer any clarifying questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Does that answer your question, sir?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There is another caller who has his or her hand raised. If tech services could unmute the person indicated by S. Would you kindly state your name and if you're in favor or opposed to this petition? You may need to unmute yourself. Perhaps the person indicated by the letter S put their hand down, his or her hand down. So it doesn't appear as though there are any comments or questions. So if there are no other comments or from the public, either in favor or in opposition to this request, we'll bring it back to us for further discussion and or a motion. Thank you. Okay. So does anyone have any questions or a motion? Yes.
So the access to lot 13, track 1, did I say the right track number, is going to come off of Old 37 now?
It's coming off of that,
Track 2.
yeah,
Track 2, yeah.
yeah.
Where are they going to gain access since?
Okay, so what's on the screen currently is the proposed preliminary plat. So lot 13, which is Mr. Conrad's parcel, if this receives approval, that will become part of his parcel. So he will have direct road frontage to West Harding Place, which is where he'll derive access. There's no access available from Old State Road 37.
Okay, but we're vacating, or that was vacated, so that easement doesn't exist that we're looking at right now, and it's showing the transfer area.
So it hasn't been vacated yet. If this receives approval, it'll be vacated. So are you referring to this one, Tron?
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious what's going to happen to that track or lot 13 to gain access. I guess I'm not following.
So lot 13 is gaining access from West Harding Place Drive. This area right here, this kind of skinny, long rectangle, that was the area that was previously dedicated as right-of-way, which no longer exists. So what the petitioner is showing, this is what the lot lines will look like. So you've got this large parcel, it goes up, connects to West Harding Place, comes back down, and then that's the remainder of his parcel.
Okay. I guess I'm still not following along the best, but they will have access, and that's kind of my main question. So, thank you.
Okay. Is there further discussion and/or a motion?
Can make a motion if Sean will help me out by getting the right slide on the screen. In the case number SPP-24-6, Harding Place Major Subdivision Preliminary Plat Amendment, I move we approve with condition of, or move it with positive recommendation and with condition of the signature blocks for all property owners involved in the amendment be added to the final plat, and the signatures for the property owners in the Conrad and Parrish Type-E Administrative Subdivision Agreement to the plat vacation also be added to the final plat.
Second.
Right, there's been a motion and a second to approve the preliminary plat with the 2 conditions based in the staff report. I'm not going to read. They're in the staff report. So a vote in favor is a vote to approve this preliminary plat.
Is there a waiver of final hearing?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. There is a waiver of final hearing, yes.
Wish to amend?
Would you like to amend?
Yes, I'll amend it and for the waiver of final hearing. That was not on the slide.
I'll second the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for catching that,
All
Colonel
right, and we're
Ferris.
going to include the waiver of final hearing approval.
Yes.
All right, I'll go ahead and call the roll. Tron Enright Randolph.
I actually figured it out. Yes, sorry, that was kind of confusing for me.
Great. Scott Ferris,
Yes.
Rudy Fields,
Yes.
David Henry,
Yes.
Jeffrey Morris,
Yes.
Edward Ullman,
Yes.
Julie Thomas,
Yes.
Margaret Clements,
Yes.
and David Bush.
Yes.
All right, motion carries 9.
Thank you, Mr. Conrad. Thank you. Okay, we move on now. We have 2 cases left, so things are looking up. Item number 4, SIA-22-1, Derby Pines Major Subdivision, a request for performance period extension at the 4200 plus or minus block of South Red Pine Drive. And I think that Ms. Behrman will be reviewing this with us.
Right. Jackie put this report together, but I'll do a presentation for it. She's been working pretty hard with the developer for this property and did a recent site visit and got some photos of the improvements that have been happening out there. And has been able to talk with the builder as well. So we're feeling pretty confident about this one and how this one's going to go. So this is the Derby Pines subdivision. I remember it underwent a rezone and then was approved as a preliminary plat here. The background here is this is an SIA petition, which stands for a Subdivision Improvement Agreement. This agreement is signed by a developer at the time they final plat a subdivision with improvements, such as sidewalks, street trees, and public roads. The developer chooses to post a financial guarantee in the form of either a cashier's check or a letter of credit for the county to manage in return for promising to complete these improvements. Over time, if the subdivision is not completed in a timely fashion and inflation occurs, this financial guarantee can be insufficient. So under the recently adopted CDO, we are now requiring developers to update their SIA document and include a new timeline for completion, plus a new estimate that adjusts for that 10% inflation cost that was determined. So this is their subdivision improvement agreement, the original one, and it does have a completion date that was stated to be January the 12th, 2023. That date has passed. So we're at, with discussions with the developer, they came up with a date of April 30th, 2028. And that's a couple years out. So what this means is that we're looking at a performance period. The performance period is the timing for which a developer completes the public improvements and successfully gets those improvements accepted into the county inventory. It does not mean that the developer has to be finished with all of the construction of the homes. For example, the houses on South Derby Drive are already accepted into a roadway maintained by the county, and that was like that before this petition went through. It was already an accepted road. So those could hypothetically still be under construction after the South Red Pine and East Holland Drives, which are still private, are accepted into the county. So under this scenario, the developer will have to meet the requirements of satisfying the performance period. So not necessarily the houses, but all of the public improvements. The goal of the performance period and inflation adjustment is to try to expedite the timeline for developers to finish all public improvements. This is so that individual homeowners are not responsible for road, sidewalk, and street tree maintenance, and if a developer does not complete all improvements and walk away. And I will say that after this winter with a lot of snowfall that we've had, we are hearing from these, subdivisions that aren't complete because sometimes those developers aren't maintaining, the snow removal. Not the case in this one. This one's fine, but I'm just saying, like, it's been something that gets brought up in the wintertime. So the developer will be required to adjust for inflation. That top box there, the subtotal that's in black, that was from the original estimate that then had been reduced. So this subdivision used to have a much larger letter of credit on file, but they successfully were able to get a portion of one of the roads into the inventory and get a reduction. This is the remainder of that amount that they still have for public improvements. So with the 3-year performance period that they're agreeing to, the 2028 date, they're going to be, we'll take that number and multiply 1.1 for each of those. So we can see in the far right column each year of inflation that they will be adding up for each one of those years. So their total inflation cost is going to be $38,774. And so then that gives us a total new letter of credit that we're going to be requesting once this is approved for the $155,918.25 to be on file with the planning department. Under state law, that could continually be reduced annually if he meets, the requirements. So there is that option to keep reducing that, but we will not be reducing the inflation amount. That inflation amount will stay with the county until a road is accepted into the inventory. So staff recommends approval with the performance period extension until April 30th, 2028. If approved, staff will require a new subdivision improvement agreement document and a performance bond document with the approved timeline of April 30th, 2028. And this would be accompanied by that new financial guarantee amount of $155,918.25. We've coordinated with the Highway Department and Stormwater Program. They are also in agreement with this extension and the release of financial guarantee. So when the developer goes to apply for a right-of-way acceptance, which is something that's required to release the entirety of the amount of that letter of credit, all departments will do a final inspection prior to that release. We'll bring it back here to you. You will get final say on the release of any of the funds. So that's all I have for.
Hey, great. Do members of the Plan Commission have questions for Ms. Behrman? Pardon me? Okay, just one moment. Do members of the Plan Commission have questions for Ms. Behrman? I see Commissioner Thomas's hand is raised.
Yes, this may be a matter of semantics, but I think it's important since we're going to see this again in other places. Clearly, the request is for the extension of the performance period. We are requiring the increase in the credit, a new letter of credit with an increased amount. Are those? I know that statistically and legally, they have to be extended. The performance period has to be extended before we ask them for that letter of credit. But at the same time, it seems to me like one is a condition of the other. So is that clear? Are we making the new financial guarantee amount a condition for the approval of the new timeline?
So within the packet, there is, parts of our ordinance in there. And I think, if I recall, it's a lot to read. They're supposed to be here within the 4 months. So we're trying to get to that.
Attorney Schilling had one thing he wanted to say.
That would be great.
In all of these requests for extensions, the amount of the performance bond has to be approved by the Plan Commission, so that should be a condition of approval.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner Thomas?
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Okay. Then we'll turn it over to the petitioner, or if the petitioner is here and would like to make a presentation to the Plan Commission, or if you're online, I see someone with the initials CB has his or her hand raised. I can't read that far away, but if they could be unmuted.
Yeah, Tech Services, could you unmute Chris B? That would be Chris Bamba, the developer.
Oh, Chris Bamba. Great.
Yes, they have mic permissions. They need to unmute themselves.
Okay, so Mr. Bamba, you just have to unmute yourself on your computer, and then you'll be able to speak. There might be an unmute button if you look for an image that looks like a microphone on your screen. You could click on that. So
we still can't hear. If you're talking, we cannot hear.
We cannot hear Mr. Bamba. But if you can press the image of the microphone with the line through it, if you could press on unmute, then we'd be able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, sir.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I had to go to a different screen. No, I'm in complete agreement with everything that the staff has with the raising of the performance bond. So I have no other real comments, but I can answer questions if needed.
Oh, thank you so much for showing up and being patient with us. Do members of the Plan Commission have any questions or statements for Mr. Bamba? Okay, we'll turn it over to the public, and if any member of the public has something negative to say, you'd have a chance to rebut it, but it doesn't look likely. Are there members of the public who would like to speak in favor or in opposition to this request? If so, come to the podium or raise your virtual hand. I don't see anyone, so we bring it back to members of the Plan Commission for further discussion and or a motion.
I can make a motion if there's no further comments. So for case SIA-22-1, the Derby Pines Major Subdivision, I move extending the performance period until April 30th, 2028, and posting a new letter of credit with the Planning Department in the amount of $100,555,918.25.
I'll second.
Did that meet the condition that you envisioned? Or?
Yes, that was 155,918.25. Yeah.
Okay, great. And there's no waiver of final hearing? No, this is just, we'll just get this done tonight. Good.
All right, so there was a motion and a second to move to approve the extension of the performance period to April 30th, 2028, and then have a letter of credit approved of the amount of $155,918.25. So is a vote to approve. David Bush?
Yes.
Margaret Clements?
Yes.
Trona Enright Randolph?
Yes.
Scott Ferris?
Yes.
Rudy Fields?
Yes.
David Henry?
Yes.
Jeffrey Morris?
Yes.
Edward Ullman?
Yes.
And Julie Thomas?
Yes.
All right, that motion carries 9-0.
Thank you, Mr. Bamba, for working so well with our staff. We appreciate it. Okay, we're moving on to item number 7 on our agenda, which is SIA-22-31, North Park Office State Road 46 Subdivision, Tract B2, Parcel 2A and 3. And this is a request for performance period extension concerning the 3,000 plus or minus block of North Lintel Drive. Ms. Behrman?
Yeah. This was my subdivision some years ago during the pandemic. In the left-hand side of the screen, this kind of orientates you to West State Road 46 and then the road that formerly was called Curry Pike, which is now Hunter Valley Road. And then to the right-hand side, the portion of the road that we're discussing is platted, kind of looks in yellow there, but it has not been accepted into the inventory yet. It seems to have been finished for quite a while, and if you haven't driven on it, it's nice. It has a lot of interesting drainage features accompanying it. And this is a photo of that road segment. So I'm going to skip the background for what an SIA petition is because we just discussed this. And this petition is a little bit different. So here we have the subdivision improvement agreement that was signed. And this one stated that the improvements were to be finished November 30th, 2021, and it was really tied into that Bloomington Regional Rehabilitation Hospital on Lot 5 that was kind of approved at the same time as this, and is really operating at full capacity now, I think. So after discussions with the developer who is here this evening, they have a new timeline request for completion of June 16th of 2025. And basically that is to get some as-builts put together, get that submitted to the highway department, and then make any small corrections that might be needed to be made to accept into inventory. I've talked with the highway department and they're pretty confident that this road is darn near finished. They've been out there a couple of times. So the developer will not be required to add inflation to their amount at this time. Their performance period extension corresponds with the expiration of their current letter of credit that's in the amount of $1,500,000 plus. So staff is not anticipating at this time a renewal of the letter of credit because we're assuming that we're going to get this accepted and get done with it. and therefore no inflation is needed at this time for this one. So staff recommends approval of the performance period extension to June 16th, 2025. If approved, staff will require the new subdivision improvement agreement and performance bond document be sent to us with the approved timeline of June 16th. That is a typo. That is June 16th of 2025. And should the road not be accepted into the inventory by June 16th, 2025, staff will present this to the Plan Commission to request another performance period extension and require the associated annual inflation at that time. Highway Department and Stormwater Program were also in agreement with this extension, and when the developer goes to apply for the right-of-way acceptance, which is required prior to the release of the financial guarantee, all departments will do that final inspection and make sure everything's in place and report back to the Plan Commission, which then you would be able to release the funds. Any questions on this one?
Anyone have questions for Ms. Behrman? We see none. Okay, then the petitioner, Mr. Kreider, do you wish to address us? Okay, does anyone here have questions for Mr. Kreider? We see none. Are there members of the public who would like to speak in favor or in opposition to this request? We see none. We see none. And so with that in mind, is there a member of the Plan Commission who'd like to make a motion?
Do we need to stipulate the dollar amount or just the extension date?
Yeah, just the extension.
Just, I'll move to approve the staff's recommendation of a performance period extension until June 16th, 2025.
Second.
Been a motion and a second to approve the performance period extension until June 16th, 2025. I'll go ahead and call the roll. David Henry?
Yes.
Jeffrey Morris?
Yes.
Edward Ullman?
Yes.
Julie Thomas?
Yes.
David Bush?
Yes.
Margaret Clements?
Yes.
Tron Enright Randolph?
Yes.
And Scott Barris?
Yes.
And Rudy Fields?
Yes.
All right, motion carries 9-0.
Thank you, Mr. Kreider, for coming out tonight and being available. Thank you. Are there any other reports from staff?
No, and I don't think we had anybody for public comment. If there was, they're limited to 3 minutes. And reports, I don't have any.
And I think we're just waiting for a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, there are no objections. So thank you, everyone, for your good work tonight. There were some very interesting, nuanced cases and some mundane bureaucracy.